My name's Emma, and I'm the founder and managing director at Chief Disruptor. We're delighted you're tuning in for our third episode in this series, exploring what's shaping flexible working. The series is about how innovative businesses are embracing flexible hybrid working and empowering employees to work from anywhere. Over the course of the 6 episodes, our guest speakers will delve into how they're rewriting the rules of work and how these changes are enabling them not only to survive, but to thrive. In this episode, we'll discuss how traditional industries have adapted to flexible working, what the tech industry is doing to make the sector more diverse and inclusive, and to the extent that tech stacks are being built to maintain essential connections remotely. Joining me to delve into these talking points is Matthew Randall, Head of Software Development and Integration at Aston Lagonda. Matthew, I'm delighted to have you joining me for today's discussion. You have a wealth of knowledge in the tech sector. You're also a strong advocate for diversity and inclusion in the workplace. I'd like to start by handing over to you to tell us a little bit more about your roles.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. So my role is fairly broad now. I've started off at Aston Martin 15 years ago as a junior software developer. And eventually come through to effectively head of software development as part of the automotive space, trying to make it obvious comparatively to an IT section of software development to car software development. It tends to add more to your job title. So it's very more focused in the IT space, business systems, and how to get business information over to either vehicles or other systems that exists around our vehicle. I look after everything software-wise within our development space, our integration to each of the different systems, as well as our data and business intelligence functions.
So a lot to be done, and also a brand we've all known for a very long time. So what we'd like to focus on to begin with is actually transforming traditional ways of working. So obviously, as you know, Aston Martin is a business that's over 100 years old. And as an organization with so much heritage, how did the business adapt initially to the overnight rush to remote working during the global pandemic?
Yeah, 110 years this year. So I think when we were coming up to it, we were like, oh no, are we going to be able to manage this? But we actually did it remarkably well. I think almost everybody was surprised at how well we adapted and how quickly. Potentially we were semi-fortunate because it took the UK a while before we decided to do a lockdown. So IT decided early to go, okay, let's try and make sure that we've planned ahead. So certain things that we'd already started doing before we had to effectively close our doors, like making sure that we had team chat and things like that, that would replace phones. But from a time, a year, 2 years before the pandemic of you can never work from home, it's not allowed, it won't work, to suddenly, oh wow, everything's working perfectly fine and the business is running. Obviously, the nature of the business, though, we did have a case of having a bit of hybrid anyway, because some of the production staff did end up coming back during some of the lockdown period. So we had a bit of some people working from home, obviously anybody that needed to look after production was in. And that was also turned around really quickly as well. But I think about 3-4 weeks, we managed to make the office or the production space safe in Wales, where we were starting to build up the DBXs.
Great achievement, really, really, really tough thing to do. And I think some businesses really flipped, didn't they, very, very quickly, and others really sort of struggled. Big changes for different industries and indeed different organizations and the structures around them. So thank you, that's really interesting to have seen. Aston Martin's been through a significant shift during the period and very much into from a traditional way of working to a more flexible model. What do you feel the biggest hurdles that you've encountered have been, and indeed how have you actually overcome them during that period?
I think the biggest hurdle was I think it's the usual situation with most of these questions. It's people. What's the biggest hurdle? Is especially people that have been around for a long time. So similar to what I was talking about a minute ago, is people that have been around for such a long time that had the thought process, oh, you can't work from home. And partly that is down to people in the production line obviously haven't got that capacity to do that because they have to be in line and they have to do their job. So there's always been that contentious thing where people that can, is it going to seem like an unfair advantage for those people? So it was that change of making sure that people understood why we were doing it and getting to that area, and then overcoming that by either showing that it's possible. And we were fairly fortunate in when it happened as well, because lots of our senior leadership changed. So we had Lawrence Stroll come in and effectively purchased the company as a private, or almost as a private, it's public, but a major shareholder. And we had a new CEO starting around the same sort of time. Probably not a great time for the CEO to start, but from a leadership direction, it allowed us to better push that forward. It was interesting how we've gone from, as I say, from not allowing us to work at all from home to then working remotely. We haven't quite gone to fully flexible model yet with our shift, but as probably can tell from me today, obviously I'm working from home. And majority of my team have been for a while. So it's useful, especially depending on what it is that you're doing.
It's been such an interesting shift, hasn't it? We've had a lot of dogs and cats and children and others that have been with us in our homes, but actually the relationships being built over the period has been wonderful to see. A real shift for so many organizations and individuals. So looking to the future, how is your organization planning to integrate flexible and remote working practices into how the business operates in the medium and long term? And what are the business benefits for this approach?
Probably, even in the short term, one of the big things that we've been looking at doing to promote a better working environment that in turn moves into that flexible working is our office. So we are in the the process of refurbing our entire office space. Currently, the canteen is a building site. And what that is allowing us to do is repurpose how the office in itself functions, and showing anybody either coming in or people that already work, you're now using the office for a different purpose than you've always done in the past. You're not coming in to work, you're coming in for a specific purpose. I guess that's short term and medium term, because it's going to take a while to redo the entire office space. But that in itself is going to be really useful. And in the medium to long term, as I mentioned, at the moment, we're very much hybrid working, but we are looking at putting in a policy for full flexible working. That in itself should really help in both the current workforce, but also bringing people in, because a lot more people are expecting that flexible approach where, we've had in the last couple of years, and I'm sure a lot of organizations have, where new people coming in going, I'm not going to work for you because you don't have that, because I can get it somewhere else.
Absolutely. 3 years of it, isn't it, nearly, and a great resignation in the middle of it. So it's been a real change. In terms of sort of the next part of what we'd like to cover, we really would like to sort of drill into and hone in on culture, diversity and inclusion. And as you've just said there, building a successful workplace isn't just about the working hours and locations, or indeed all those sort of what we would consider maybe baseline historically. Culture is also a hugely important part of that, and really a defining factor for many organizations, particularly in the talent war, if you like, that we have at the moment. What would you say that your company culture has looked like, and indeed how, more importantly, has it changed since moving to flexible ways of working? What do those changes look like? So if you can share a little bit on that company culture, how it's changed to more flexible ways of working, but also in the ways in which it has changed.
Yeah, no, not a problem. I think it goes down to that perception that we were talking about earlier. Again, the change in people's perceptions, as well as their ability to understand what it is and why we're doing things in changing those things culturally, and why we're doing them, right? We so many times that the reason why it was done initially with the pandemic is we were forced to, right? So many companies had to, because otherwise they'd be gone bankrupt. You can't just close the doors forever. But by doing so, it's allowed people that have potentially not had the power to do it before, or if they weren't heard, to say, I want to be able to do this because of all these reasons. Now it's we're already doing it, let's improve it because of various reasons, be it because of somebody being disabled, somebody who has family commitments, and various things like that. So the biggest change that I think I have seen within the organization is, especially within the spaces that I've looked after, is people are kind of happier. They can do what they want to do. So there's people that obviously love going to the office and they wouldn't work well at home, and giving them a space to do that and work with the team. And then there's certain people, I'm a very big advocate of this space because of what I look after. Developers just go into the office and put their headphones on. They don't interact with anybody. In fact, it just irritates them most of the time. I remember early on in my career at Aston Martin, we fought hard to having an office by ourselves in a quiet corner because we didn't want to get interrupted by loud noises and things like that. It was proper IT crowd, you know, nice room, door, no windows, no natural light. Where mushrooms grow. Everybody's very different, right?
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's the big change, is understanding that people are different. And it's difficult to know where the mindset in itself changed, or because people now have that ability to, have people now recognized that that's there. So many things exist around the world and changed. Where has that?
Absolutely.
What's caused it? What's the cause and effect?
Yeah. And culturally, what sort of environment do you feel you're trying to create at Aston Martin, both for now and for the future? You've shown or described some of those changes, but really sort of drilling into that, what do you think that environment looks like for your team now, and what will it look like in the future?
I think the quickest word to explain that is inclusive. Is trying to be inclusive of multiple things, not just for retention or people. But I think the key thing from the culturally, because Aston Martin, and in my opinion, we make some of the most beautiful cars in the world, is a very creative atmosphere. And without having a culturally diverse and inclusive atmosphere, you lose a lot of creative thought processes. Software and tech in itself is really creative, even though most people think of it as a mathematical formula. If you don't have the creative juices running in it, you're just producing the same thing over and over and again, and we won't make all these advancements that we've seen in the tech industry with things like the metaverse coming out and various different items like that. And it's the same thing with us, with an 110-year-old company. If we didn't develop, and from when I first started and the DB9 was out, we would still have the DB9. It sold well. Or why change it if it's still selling? You got to continue to create. And I think without that inclusive mindset, you lose that. And it's nice knowing that you can continue to bring this in by being culturally aware of what is there and don't stagnate and rest on your laurels.
No, really good to hear it. I know you've been instrumental in developing a diversity and inclusion group at Aston Martin. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I think a lot of members and others could learn from that.
But firstly, I want to highlight, obviously, this is very much a team exercise as well in the group. I myself have been very passionate in trying to push this within AML, and have done so before an equality, diversity and inclusion group even existed. However, I think similar to what I was saying earlier, some of the ideas weren't heard previously, and it was hard to try and push it. And I'm sure there was multiple other people doing the same thing that I didn't know about as well. So as somebody like myself who is non-binary and family members with various different disabilities, I've been trying to push that, and I tried pushing it in within IT. And I always remember the first time that I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, put out a group to all of IT who want to join to try and help us improve this. And this was not that long ago, before COVID, but not too long ago. And one person raised their hand, and it was, a middle-aged white guy. I'm like, well, that's not exactly what one would call the most diverse situation in the world. However, since then, we have, with all the changes, with the new culture and everything like that, we have now got a proper company-wide ED&I group. And with that, we have managed to put in so many different things, or start talking about things and think about that up front. So I was talking about the office refurb. So we were very much involved in what we should be doing in the office refurb to make people want to come into the office when they should be coming into the office. We have run various events throughout the previous year. From Pride Month, we did various different work with the F1 team, as long with a great organization called Racing Pride. We ran through things for November. There was a great Eid celebration type thing to try and learn about other people that work in there. Unfortunately, I missed that because they had snacks and treats and stuff, which is a crying shame. I missed that because it's always tasty. But I think a lot of that is all coming in. And lately, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at flexible working policy. So that has gone to the group and going, have a look at this. What do you think from the wider pool? Is there anything that we've missed? Because I think I mentioned it at Disruptor Live, is I think one of the things that a lot of people forget, even if you classify yourself in one of these diverse categories, there is so many. And you naturally will not realize it's about something else, because there is so many things and so many different types of people. Yes. And at the end of the day, people make the world go round. A lot of people say money, but I'm pretty sure it's people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. How important do you think then flexible working is as a tool for improving diversity and inclusion at work? Are you seeing that flexible working as a tool really playing out? It feels as it is really a tool of success for you based on what you've said so far.
Yeah, no, very much so. And I guess I'll kind of carry on from the same thought and vein. Everybody is very different. And I think that flexible working hits differently depending on who you are. So if you are a parent, how many times has a parent been told, no, you can't go and pick up your kids until this time because that's when school finishes. So you have after school classes and all this sort of stuff to do this. Whereas, me being able to go, yes, spend your 45 minutes to go and take care of your children, come back and then work, and have that level of trust. And I think trust is really key as well. Is historically 50 years ago, most managers didn't trust their workforce, right? This is what you will be doing and I will monitor what it is you're doing. Again, tech space, we're kind of fortunate in this, that we've reinvented as part of tech, but in a company like Aston Martin, and it'll be the same with companies like banking industry, anything that's been around for a long time, you kind of have to change that culture to allow you to get to that point. So flexible working is key. One of the things I mentioned earlier is some of my family members have some disabilities. So I have in my family MS, and I remember quite a while ago now, there was somebody in the office that had MS, and they were in every single day. But knowing other people in my family that do, it is a struggle to get into a taxi or something like that and get into the office when there is no need to. Perfectly capable faculty-wise to work, but getting to the office and going through that struggle is very different. And I say that's obviously only 2 points, and there are so many different other reasons why that flexible working helps and improves productivity. I think there's a lot of bias from history where you think that if you're not working 9 till 5, you're not being productive. Twitter, you must work a minimum of 40 hours a week and work hard. There is certain aspects of working hard at specific points of time is important. However, if you just do that all the time, you burn yourself out, you burn out your workforce. And yeah, sure, they're there, but you're only doing 50% of productivity while you're there. So you might as well not and work those less hours. Making sure holidays are taken care of, various things like that. One of the things that I fully believe in, and I know a lot of people are really bad at it, is when they're on holiday, go on holiday. Don't check your emails every 5 minutes, answering them all the time, because you come back and you're not refreshed. Say, tending to children, it's already a stressful job. I understand. I'm a dog daddy, not a human daddy, so I think it's slightly different, but I understand it's quite stressful anyway. So being able to reduce that and lower that for those times of the day or whatever allows that flexibility. And even to the case of, okay, if you have flexible working, of your working hours is 9:30 till 2, but going, okay, great, your child is sick or something like that, please take care of it. Don't worry. I know that you're going to continue working at another time and either work it back or whatever. But if you don't, the following week they're going to be even more stressed out and your productivity is going to go down. It's really important. And the other side from us, because again, we're automotive, is finding that balance as well. Because as I mentioned previously, one of the reasons why we didn't have it before is because production staff can't have that same flexibility. Yes. You can't work from home. You can't build the engine and then take it back. It doesn't quite work that way. So you need to have a give and take from both directions, right? Production staff understand that there is a level of give with staff, and staff need to understand from the production side. Again, it works with people that need to understand everybody's viewpoints, rather than going, oh, well, I'm not getting it, so you can't get it.
And actually, obviously, in your sector, you have got production, you have got aspects that other sectors don't have to worry about it. You can't, as you say, take that machinery home, you can't take the engines home, all the rest of it. Some industries are much easier. You can take the laptop on the train, start heading home, going to school, or whatever it might be. But I think, you brought up some really important things there. Trust, that diversity, that inclusion, that happiness, all of those aspects are so important to how we all function. I think so much goes around in our brain, doesn't it, that we need to make sure that we're allowing our teams and individuals to really allow for all of those different flexible worlds. And I think we all enjoy being able to have more of a varied life now, rather than black and white working environment. So thank you very much. I'd love to move on to more of the sort of the tech enablers now. No stranger to disruption, as you said, being 110 years old in its own right, but also IT teams as a whole have really faced unprecedented demand recently from the global pandemic and the shift to hybrid work and the ever-present cybersecurity concerns. So as a tech leader, as a technology leader, how have you supported your teams through those uncertain times?
It's interesting because obviously the big disruption has been the pandemic. And so from our perspective within IT, within AML, we've actually used that. So it's actually been a help rather than a hindrance in some aspects. We've gone, okay, great, production aren't at full capacity or not working at all during some of the lockdown, which means that we can refocus some of it to new items, working on various parts of the digital transformation. As I mentioned, we had a new CEO just beforehand as well, which obviously always comes with loads of great new ideas and development. So yeah, we've been kind of fortunate in a way that it's allowed us to do so. If it's a purely tech company, you've just gone with a disruption without any of the extra benefits. It's one of those spaces that's really interesting, where just because you're working on a project, because you can't get a load of new people to go and start that, you're having to redivert. So that's allowed us to do some of the work that we've not been able to do for a long time, which was a nice opportunity to go, yes, let's take in this. And because we've had new senior leadership, we've had the fortunate that they've gone, yes, please, with my blessing, go and do this. And the cybersecurity concerns are the same. I think anything that is a really legacy type area, I think the NHS is probably a really good example, where they always stick on old tech. Something like cybersecurity concerns alters that, right? You suddenly go, oh, this is a problem. So you start going, a load of people that you didn't have previously has been brought on board to tackle that. So again, it's a net new item rather than attempting to backfill it with what you already have. And that's what we've done. So we had a cyber team that come in to try and start handling some of our new tech, but then that's been bolstered even further, going, as we went public, going, okay, we need to make sure that all of these ducks are in a row, and we challenge more from IT and the cyber concerns going, no, these are a real threat, let's tackle them. So yes, it's been because of the disruptions rather than it making it harder.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you've also been on a real transformational journey, a digital transformational journey recently. And we've seen you innovate your e-commerce platforms and website, and you've looked to implement new digital products and features in the cars as well. How have you kept these projects moving despite these recent disruptions?
It's a good question. I think we've been fairly fortunate, again, that allowed us to do this. I think the biggest problem we've had is we've taken on too much. We've suddenly been given this opportunity to improve things. We're like, okay, we're going to improve this, and we've still got a limited amount of resources. We've got way too much on. So I think if anything, it's more of a warning for anybody else that tries doing it, is remember to run the business while you're still going with all the new items. There's always problems. So as you're going through, remember, especially if it's a operational type business like we are, remember about the operational stuff while you're still worrying about the future. And you need to be able to measure both, because again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. Don't stagnate as a business. You have to be creative and move forward. But on top of the create, you then need to actually physically make it a thing rather than just a brainchild. So I think that's where we really are really with that, is make sure that you do it correctly and think about the now as well as the then, and don't take on too much.
The shiny new tools. And I think you mentioned burnout before, but how do you get that burnout when there's the excitement of the new tools and you keep everything going so on? A constant quandary to have to try and work through and take your teams with you, and obviously make sure that you've got happy customers and so on along the way. Exactly. So just in terms of our hybrid working world that we're all now in, that high functioning IT is essential. How do you choose your best available devices, software applications to deliver the experience, the culture for collaboration, the digital transformation you're aiming for? Some really big things have to consider there. How do you make those choices?
I think in the world we are now, and what we're trying to do with the flexible working, is think online first, think work anywhere. Even if you're not necessarily working anywhere, think that way, because that allows you to evolve to the next level. If I think of 5-10 years ago on the web, you started thinking mobile first. It's a similar sort of approach where you're going, think anywhere on any device that makes sense. But don't push too far, right? So think about what makes sense. Don't necessarily make the production stuff online because it has to be on site. But think first going, can we do this outside? So using the cloud, using laptops rather than desktops. And I mean, I remember when I had my desktop at work that was like this big, to using a just slightly more powerful laptop. Will it do the job? Yes. Are you running a bunch of computational CAD items? Will that work on a laptop? Probably not. But does that mean that you can do that in the virtual space another way? That's the sort of items that needs to be looked at in each of these spaces. And fortunately, at least in the UK, most places have decent internet. Although saying that, any form of video call, you can tell that that's not necessarily always the case. So have backup plans.
Yes, definitely. And you know, jumping on trains and other things. But I think you're right. We used to live in the world, didn't we, where BT or whoever it may be would sort of cut through cables in the pavement while you're working, and you just got on to do other things. So I think, as you say, there's that constant revolving door of how to engage, how to be productive, and how to continue to have a sense of humour throughout all of it.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And again, I was fairly fortunate as well in a lot of this. Is I'd started planning to doing a lot of this back in 2016 before we were allowed to do it. So I think, again, coming from tech, you see a lot more of what is coming up in the future. And if the senior leadership, if you're in one of these old companies that isn't necessarily a tech company, allowing them to believe what is coming is important. And again, I was fortunate because when I got moved to Wales at one point in time with our new factory, I had to work remotely with 2 different teams in 2 different locations, one in England and one in Wales. So I'd already started putting in a lot of the tech required to allow you to do that. So from source control being on servers to being in the cloud and things like that to allow you to do it, which again, going back to one of your earlier questions, how easy was the transition? Some of it was really easy because we'd already started putting it in place before it happened, before we were allowed to do it.
Such big changes, and I think it's phenomenal what you've achieved, and with very high expectations from customers and retaining that sort of luxurious angle, that the customers are experiencing a huge amount to achieve and bring everyone together and take them on the journey as you go forward. So thank you so much. We're nearly out of time, but before we do finish up, I'd love to end with a quick fire round. So just what trend do you believe will have the biggest impact on your business and your teams in 2023?
Oh, that's tough. I think the biggest change is going to be how people consume and talk to our retailers. And this is maybe not 2023, but going into the next iteration of items. As we're talking about flexible working, that's the same thing with retail network. I mean, we already go through these shops now, and unfortunately, you go through high street, how many closed areas there are, because of the way that people purchase now is different. And we need to catch up with that and make sure that we understand how that works. And because we're a global organization, is understanding how that works in every single aspect. China is very different to the UK, which is very different to the US, which is very different to India. So balancing that, I think, is going to be the biggest impact.
Thank you so much. And what is your go-to tech tool?
That's a broad question. I think for me, judging by what we were talking about, is Azure DevOps. So having a single tool that allows the tech-focused people to work in a space that is collaborative, as well as sharing resources. So we use Azure DevOps, but you could be using Jira, Confluence, and items like that. I think that's the best thing to do.
What would be your go-to business idea you wish you'd had?
I wish I had probably something like Slack, that communication tool. Again, something like that early on, right? Knowing that you needed to start being able to talk, not just verbally, which is still really important. I think that's always a hard thing when we go into this thing where people go back into the office like, so how does talking work? Yeah. Still need to do that, still need to pick up those skills, but that instant communication is really important, especially with global businesses. And so many more people are working with people in the US, Canada, India, Japan. So that instant communication, really important. So something like Slack.
Yeah. So actually, you might have answered the next question, which is, what would your go-to form of communication be? Would it be email, phone calls, text messages, Teams, Slack? What would it be?
It depends on the communication. And I always tell this to all of my team members. It's something I think all tech people, not all, most tech people are really generally bad at. We're like instant communication, WhatsApp, Zoom messages. I won't do the human interaction. We all of us introverts were like, you know what, this is great, this whole pandemic thing. I don't need to talk to people. However, there are various different things, as we were saying, with the new office space where we want to be collaborative. You want to have that in-person meet. If you're doing something creative, doing it via text message. An example I always give for this to my team members is math. If you're in class, way back in school, and a teacher tries to explain a math equation in words, you're not going to understand it without the speaking, doing, and actually writing. And that's the case with a lot of our items. I think you need to have various different items. However, saying that, instant messaging is fantastic. Be gone with meetings that are 45 minutes. That is a 5-second communication.
No, absolutely. Thank you. This has been a fantastic discussion, and a really big thank you, Matthew, for your insights, and indeed to those of you who are watching. If you do have any thoughts or questions, please do reach out to us at Chief Disruptor or to our partner GoTo for more information on any aspect of the discussion today. And be sure to catch up with more episodes in this series on the trend shaping the future of flexible work. So once again, thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.